Hi, Robert. Thank you so much for joining us today from NRGV. We're so pleased to have you at our Battery Technology Conference and look forward to discussing the future of the business with you.
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Right off the bat, for investors that are not familiar with NRGV, could you give us a brief overview of the company?
For our company, Energy Vault focuses on energy storage, and we focus pretty broadly on the energy storage segment. It's a large and growing segment that is tied to the renewable growth in wind and solar that's being deployed globally. Energy storage plays a critical role in that in terms of addressing the intermittency. And our portfolio of solutions that we developed address the need for short duration storage, 2 to 4 hour, and we do that via a software platform and lithium-ion batteries. It includes a long duration product portfolio of gravity applications, and that addresses anything from 4 to up to 12 plus hours of storage need. And it also includes solutions for microgrids and multi-day storage. And we do that through applying green hydrogen and a fuel cell in hybrid systems to be able to back up, whether that be cities or industrial operations for multi-days and do it in a very economical way. So that's the portfolio of our solutions focused on how we're solving problems that our customers have in and around energy storage.
Excellent. Thanks for that color. I think it's very helpful. So moving on from there, do you think you could give us a little bit of color on your first gravity project, which is currently entering its commissioning phase? Very exciting things going on there. I think it'd be nice to have a real world example of the technology.
Sure, we're very excited about that and the partnership we have with Atlas Renewable and China Tianying. They're locally in mainland China, and that system is a 25 megawatt 4 hour system for gravity. So that's on the lower end of what we would consider long duration, but that is the application. They love that solution because it's flexible, it's potential energy at height. So while it's serving a 4 hour need, it has a very long technical life, and that system can be adapted to meet longer duration needs over time. So we have a 35-year plus technical life, and that system is in the commissioning phase. It'll be the first gravity energy storage in the world that's not a pumped hydro electric system at this scale, and one of the first ones at that scale in any long duration technology as well. So we're very excited about that and bringing that online to complement what we're building in Texas with another gravity energy storage system with Enel Green Power.
I think that your gravity towers are pretty approachable from a level of, call it, the understandability of the technology. Pumped hydro storage is the dominant player in the United States and certainly in Western Europe. What kind of data do you think customers need to see from that first real world example in order to be convinced of the effectiveness of the gravity towers?
Sure. Well, I think number one, in terms of the base technology being gravity, I tell people all the time it's not an idea, and not a new idea, it's the law actually. So it's the basis of 90% of all energy storage, these pumped hydroelectric systems. So I'd say that's understood, but to have these systems operating in an independent structure, which is what we've built with our EVX system, and new applications we're building around systems that take advantage of certain topologies, for example. I think they want to be able to see just a functioning system. So first of all, in terms of providing continuous power and operating at scale, at the large scale, that we're operating at. I mean, these are large systems. They're big structures. They're 25 metric ton blocks. So all of that would be new. So they just want to see one fundamental operation in providing continuous power. Secondly, I think they're very interested in looking at the round trip efficiency. So if you look at any mechanical system, thermodynamic process, everything that's not lithium ion, you're in a range of 50% to up to 75% of round trip efficiency. So that's a measure of with every unit of energy you store, how much can you discharge back to the grid? Interestingly, here we demonstrated over 75% in our first tower in Switzerland with our new EVX system that's being built in China and the US. It's expected to be between 80 to 85%. So I think the second thing people are going to be looking at is that efficiency of the system. And the third is just market adoption, which would answer the question around the economics. So, we get questions about what are the fundamental economics? How does it compare? And that you can measure a lot of different ways in terms of initial capex, the levelized cost over time, which is, I think, for a long technical life asset like this, is how our customers think about using gravity, as they would like a pumped hydro system. And I think that you measure around market adoption, and that's where, as an example, in China alone, here we're commissioning the first system, and they've already announced 3.2 gigawatt hours of new systems, new gravity systems for deployment. So that obviously is a strong vote of confidence in not only the operability of the system and the performance, but the economics and other things that we're working on that have been announced in the U.S. and in places like India, for example, for new projects. So I think those would be the three things I'd say.
Yeah, that's right. And I would need to believe that that ease of understanding should foster market adoption moving forward, right? It's a concept that's very easily understood as you go to explain it.
Yeah, it is, and that was fundamental for us as we looked at coming to market, because we feel the urgency of time, Brian. So we feel the urgency of addressing this problem. It is urgent, and hence we didn't want to rely on long-term science projects or roadmaps or things that may have some probability but may take 5 years, for example, to prove out. So that was one of the reasons we started with gravity, and then used our software platform, of course, to address short duration and ultra long duration with other technologies.
Yeah, very good. You've spoken to China. It's an important market for the company. Could you speak a little bit about your partnerships in that region, and also about your, call it the potential to expand elsewhere in the world, be it in South Africa or India or the United States?
Sure. China was interesting for us, and then the nature of the business model also is interesting for us because of the nature of our technology. And what I mean by that is these gravity systems are essentially just a building. So you're building a structure locally. Our strength isn't in construction. We're a technology company, so it lends itself because the nature of how most of the solution can be built and sourced locally. We don't have rare earth metals or any supply chain issues, so it lends itself to this licensing model where you license the technology and then get royalties over time as things get built out. So for China, you asked first about the partnerships there and what's been announced. We have one licensee that's a great partner that can build and execute all across China. Is a public company. That's important. It's also a group, Atlas Renewable, that is prominent in terms of its relationship in China because it's the Bush Family Foundation, and Neil Bush himself is the chairman. So that has all the attributes of the right partnerships to go build out locally, in a way that, as we know, China is now the largest market for energy storage and has pretty aggressive goals, given they're still building coal plants. So they're going to need renewables to really catch up. So, and storage is mandated there. It's actually a mandate formally from the government. The other growth areas you mentioned, important to us, South Africa, we're seeing a lot of both interest and a lot of customer activity there, and we'll be sharing more about that here in the coming weeks and months about the traction of the projects there. The U.S. market is also very interesting, and also because the nature of the IRA or what was the Inflation Reduction Act, but in particular, a lot of the initiatives that are associated with renewable build-outs. and other markets that I think where gravity will fit well. We've announced some things in India and was just there a few months ago, and building relationships with some of the largest companies in the world there that are going to be deploying storage. Now they're going to be growing in a very large way because there hadn't been a lot of storage deployments in the past. So I think gravity will, just like it is for pumped hydro, will have a role to play along with many other technologies in energy storage. But we're addressing that and capturing that market a lot through these licensing and royalty models, which is a good way to do it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the IRA there. How do you feel about government support for the sector within the United States? And how does it compare to what governments elsewhere in the world are doing in Western
Yeah.
Europe or Asia?
I would say the U.S. and what the Biden administration has done with the IRA and the incentives, where storage now, for example, is qualifying for the ITC, as well as the new incentives that have come about, is a leadership role in the world and really putting something in place that not only will be good for local jobs and providing some energy independence with some of the subsidies and getting a lot of technologies built in the U.S., but fundamentally good for the renewable sector and sustainability and trying to reduce GHG emissions. I mean, the U.S. is the second largest emitter in the world behind China, so we have a lot to do here. So I think that has a big impact, and the other impact it has on the world is, the EU and other places have begun to follow suit, and so that really created a lot of impetus across the world for whether groups of countries like the EU or other large countries to look at similar programs. Australia is looking at implementing a lot of incentives. And then you have China that has mandated storage. So they've mandated up to 20% storage must be installed when you're installing wind or solar. And those numbers add up quickly. If you have a 500 megawatts of solar, 20% of that's 100 megawatt at power of storage, times 2 to 4 hours. So if it's 4 hours, that's 400 megawatt hours of storage you have to couple with wind and solar. So that is a mandate. So I would say the regulatory environment is starting to move just the last, I'd say, 24 months. And that obviously is encouraging. And I think those are tailwinds to opportunities we see in our sector.
Yeah, very good. Speaking of the sector and kind of growth you see ahead of it, what other companies should investors have on their radar that are perhaps operating in the same type of niche? And how do you see growth for, call it, the next few years for the sector as a whole?
Sure. Let me take the last question first, and then I'll come back to the other companies. I think growth overall, no matter what numbers you look at from Bloomberg or Lazard or any of the groups that put them out and look at what companies are saying, it's large. It's double-digit CAGRs. I think by 2030, the number that's thrown around is about 300 billion. I don't go out to 2040 because the numbers get so big, and there's only so much in front of me I want to make a comment on with some level of reliability. So I'd say that the numbers are large because the need is great, and so that fundamental demand is there. I would say in looking at companies generally, companies like ours that are focused on energy storage, typically you're going to get sets of companies that are focused on the shorter duration market of battery deployments, which is most of the market today in terms of new energy storage. It's the shorter duration market, and there's names out there that I think are fairly well known. Fluence is one. A portion of Tesla's business is doing this as far as lithium-ion battery goes, that are, I think, public companies, that are some names. Again, there's not a lot of public companies out there in energy storage, actually, when you count. When you get to long duration, there's, again, just very few names out there in terms of companies that are deploying and at the levels that are being deployed or announcing what we've announced and garnered in licensing. There's not a lot that's public and investable. You've got some flow battery and other zinc air battery companies that are just getting started and still getting things, I'd say, proven out from that perspective. So still, I'd say quite new. I mean, long duration is still, I would say, even emerging. I think we're one of the few long duration companies that is building out at the scale. But there are some smaller and upcoming companies, like ESS is one of them, and EOS is another one, the zinc air, so that are public and investable, but again, still at a stage where they're still, I think, emerging and growing. On the gravity side, there's not only no other public companies, but even on the private company side, you have folks that have gotten grant funding or seed funding, but no one's moved beyond that. Green gravity, gravitricity. So there are some companies, but still just getting started. So we're really in a new space. There's a host of private companies that are looking to do things, Brian, out there that I'm assuming some of those may become investable and maybe come to the public markets. But that's sort of the landscape. And I'll just finish with, I'd say uniquely, we're addressing all those durations. So the short, long, and even the multi-day or the microgrid, and we're doing that with green hydrogen in our software. That's unique. I think unique in storage, Energy Vault is addressing all of those segments. So our TAM and our growth vector and the ability to address it is going to be really bigger than anybody else, just because of the nature of what we're addressing. And that's one of the things that's exciting. Generally, we root for everybody in energy storage. We don't really view competitors per se, because we need as much of it as we can get. So I'm rooting for everybody here.
Yeah, that's right. I tend to agree with you on that sentiment. And I think what's very exciting about your technology is not only are you rolling it out in a real world example, there's very limited degradation to the energy that's stored in this tower. So very exciting to see it in real life as that project is completed. We find ourselves at that time of the year where investors are taking stock of their portfolios, managements are taking stock of their strategies. Looking back over 2023, what do you see as the company's key achievements, and what lays ahead of the company in 2024? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? How do you feel heading into next year?
Yeah, I'd say one of the main achievements and one of the main goals for us for 2023 was and continues to be to execute on a lot of the larger contracts we announced last year with some of the largest, companies in the U.S. in whether that be utilities or independent power players and some of the biggest names. So that for 23 was and continues to be fundamental. I was just at a ribbon cutting over the first system we've turned over here in the U.S. right in Southern California at Wellhead, which manages hybrid peaker natural gas plants with a standalone battery energy storage. So we just turned over last quarter and formally with a ribbon cutting a 275 megawatt hour system that is going to enable them to reduce the GHGs on their essentially on their hybrid plant, their natural gas plant, the peaker plant, by 90%. So, and we brought that plan up within 24 hours of mechanical completion with our software, which is amazing. And they even said, and it's quoted, it was unprecedented for them to see that. So fundamentally for 2023, I'd say us continuing to do that this year here in this final quarter and executing well on, we have two other projects that are going to be turning over as well, one in Texas, one in Nevada. So doing that well and that's what it's all about, right? Is everything that goes into getting a project announced, done, executed, but then having it contribute to the grid and putting clean energy on the grid. So that's 23. And I'd say the second part of your question, very important, to this point of has investors look at their portfolio, is how do we look at going forward in 2024? And, we continue to see a lot of growth opportunities in this space, and we, focus globally on that. So we have been doing a lot of work in Australia, for example, and expect some things to be announced here in the near term on some of our work there and with our partners. We have a unique investor base that includes, people like BHP, the largest mining company in the world, Korea Zinc, which has large operations in Australia. They're the largest, non-ferrous metals producer in the world: silver, zinc, lead, indium, which is a rare soft metal, and even folks like Saudi Aramco, and looking at some of the things that are transforming there in the Middle East. Of course, COP28 there going on now. So I'd say definitely the growth profile in a good state there. And then I think investors are going to look at cash, and especially on new companies like ours that are we're in our second year of revenue. We did 148 million in our first year. We're guided to do 2 to 3 times that this year. So that's a healthy growth profile. And as we announced after our last earnings, we're well over 100 million in cash, no debt on the balance sheet, and are now in our first phases of getting cash turned over. So I think that's an important factor and a good reason for folks to look at Energy Vault here, and given both growth in our balance sheet and what we continue to build.
Well, we're excited to see what 2024 holds for the energy storage segment and for NRGV. Thank you so much for joining us for our mini conference, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Great, Brian. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.